earthquake. That is very, very important. Back to you.
Okay, all right. We also have some more breaking news coming in. The Singapore Foreign Minister has called for immediate ceasefire in Myanmar to facilitate earthquake aid efforts. Singapore has also announced a government contribution of $150,000. On that note, let me also bring in Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor into the conversation. Ambassador Kapoor, like I said, there's a troubling developments taking place in an already sensitive country like Myanmar, where there is political as well as civil unrest for the past many years. And before that, of course, for many decades as well, has been going on. But looking in the aftermath of the 2021 coup, we do see that the military junta has sent out a message that it does not want to stop the airstrikes, even though there is a natural disaster that has taken place. What really is the message that you feel that the military could be wanting to send out to the rebel groups, given the current situation?
That Myanmar is going through so many problems at the same time, and these have been further compounded by this very severe earthquake, because this is 7.7 Richter scale, which is very devastating for any country, and particularly countries where the earthquake norms are not very stringent, as the Major General was also saying, because in Chile, where I lived, the norms were very strict, and most of the people did construction which was more than the required norms, beyond the norms. So when we had the fifth biggest earthquake, when I was the ambassador there, in the history of the world, very few buildings collapsed, and the number of deaths was very limited. Even though the earthquake was about 8.6 Richter scale, it was a very surprising fact for me to see that there was a tsunami also after that. More people died in the tsunami than in the earthquake. So for the people to be able to build that sort of construction, those edifices, was so amazing that there were tall buildings, skyscrapers, which were on wheels, as one of the other panelists mentioned. So the building would move, the buildings would sway left and right. You could see the whole building moving left and right, but it would not collapse. So the only significant structure which collapsed was the entire airport, because the airport had, the people concerned had taken special permission to build the airport below the required norms. So when that earthquake took place, the entire airport collapsed, and Chile, no flights could come in or go out of Chile for about 10-12 days because there was no airport, no functioning airport, and the tarmac had fissures, so planes could not land. So it was a very difficult period for a lot of people who had to take flights out of Chile, who had come as tourists also. So here also, I guess the norms have to be made stricter, and people have to understand that they have to follow these bylaws, and it is to their benefit. Because if such a severe earthquake were to happen here, the number of deaths would be in very, very large numbers. It's fortunate that the earthquake severity in our part of the world, in India and the neighborhood, is not as severe as in Japan or Chile or some of these other countries, where the supersonics, the biggest earthquakes take place. But even then, the number of people who die is very, very large, even with the smaller level earthquakes. And this earthquake was not a very small earthquake. It is another matter that the military is continuing its bombing efforts and trying to subdue the rebels and the ethnic groups which are rebelling. That they should stop immediately. The message has to go out very strongly from the international bodies and India also, that while these relief efforts are going on, you cannot continue with your bombing of the rebel groups, because all people have suffered, and earthquake is not selective that some areas or some cities or some people suffer. A lot of people have suffered. So while everybody is helping Myanmar to get back on its feet, they have to work together with the international agencies, with the international people who are coming in. And India, of course, has some of the best expertise in the world in this regard. The National Disaster Management Authority of India is one of the most respected organizations in the world. The capacity which India has in the world, I think very few countries have. The speed of response which India has, I don't think any other country has that.
Yes.
So to land people there, to land equipment there, to land medicines there, to land blankets there, to land health requirements, to cope with the health requirements of the people, food requirements of the people, the capacities which India has built up, not only for itself but for other countries, is absolutely phenomenal. India's interventions are very, very appreciated. Even in Chile, we were the biggest donor and the biggest country which came into the maximum amount of aid for Chile to recover from that severe earthquake. So India's capabilities are absolutely phenomenal. They are very respected, very acknowledged, very appreciated. So if India has to move in a very big way, it's already moved in a very significant way. It's probably amongst the biggest
Yes.
actors on the ground even already. So they have to also communicate, because our ambassador in Myanmar has very direct links with all the people in terms of the ruling party and with the rebels. So he has to also communicate a very strong message that this will not be, sort of tolerated, and they have to control their urge to bring down the rebels at this time, so that the people can be rescued. People, because as one of the other panelists mentioned, the earlier you start rescuing people, the safer it is for them, because otherwise they suffocate, they die, they breathe mud, and they cannot come out alive. So to bring that also, to make that happen, it is very important. But the after shocks which you mentioned about, that is in a game of nature. You can never say, because in Chile also, after that big earthquake, we kept on having very massive earthquakes of 6.3, 6.4, 6.7
Yes.
Richter scale, and then it reduced to 4. So the period for which it continued was many weeks and a few months. So it is very difficult to predict that, because it's all nature. But you have to continue the efforts, irrespective of the fact that aftershocks may come, because you cannot delay the intervention and the rescue measures. Back to
Absolutely.
you.
Ambassador Kapoor, thank you so much for that assessment. And as Ambassador Kapoor was also